All right. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to
Good morning.
our Sunday study. It's good to see you guys. This is part 2 in our discussion on inequity in education with Sunada Roberts and Chloe Oustrich leading our discussion. Sunada has been in education for 17 years. She is currently working in Harrisburg School District. Are you at SciTech, Sunada?
Nope, I'm at John Harris as an instructional coach now.
John Harris. Okay, wonderful. And Chloe has been here in the city working with the Sycamore House and with St. Stephen's School downtown. And both of them have been very involved in Free Together, which is a local organizing group. And one of the things that these two have in particular been focusing on is this topic of inequity in education. And so I think I'll open us in a word of prayer, and then we'll turn it over to Sunada and Chloe. God, thank you so much for today and this opportunity we have to gather. We thank you for Chloe. We thank you for Sunada and their expertise. We thank you for their willingness to come and teach us a little bit. We pray that you'll give us open hearts and open minds to receive today, and that we might know, what can we do about this situation as we're being made aware of it. How can we form relationships with people? How can we be committed to this work? God, just do what you want to do in us and in this space. And again, we thank you for the opportunity to be together. It's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen and amen.
Amen.
All right. I'll turn it over to Chloe and Sunada.
Well, thank you everyone for joining us this morning. I am going to get ready to kind of share my screen. And let me do that. Okay. I think I can see everybody now. Okay, so I guess this is what I'm about to share is kind of the information from Education Voters PA. And I know I shared some of that information from before when we met the last time, but this was kind of their policy update and just talking about kind of some of the moves, the political moves that Governor Wolf is trying to use as far as the funding and kind of how it would be spent. So this is kind of what they shared in a general group once the budget proposal came out, and a lot is happening. So this is just kind of some of the updates from that. And then Chloe and I can kind of share anything else too with you. Okay, so this is, so I'll now begin. Okay, so when last time, we were discussing about how the fair funding formula, which is really critical, like these next 6 to 7 weeks, by the end of June, beginning of July, there is going to be some decision made on how this fair funding formula that we discussed the last time is going to be used. So it's either, and we know that from the fair funding formula, as you can kind of see in the second paragraph here, that just 11% of the state's basic education funding flows through the formula. So some type of an accountability needs to happen. And there are different bills now as far as, should we do this like on a 4-year term? Should we do this in 6 years? Some people want to say like kind of blow it up and start immediately using the fair funding formula the way we should. But some type of movement is going to happen in like the next couple of weeks. So definitely watch out in the news as you see that progress and kind of what's going to be happening. And if you kind of Google it now with there's a lot of things happening, and you can just Google it and you'll see like how some school districts are coming together now, advocating for fair funding, or it's going to be politicized much more. But that's what they're talking about, and decisions will be made. So once again, the fair funding formula and how it's applied, because only this 11% is being used, it inequitably distributes the money, or how it's distributed doesn't help these low wealth communities. And low wealth communities were the communities, when we talk of that tax base and being able to kind of get funding from your local tax base, and also from the housing, it puts it in this cycle and this pressure point of not being able to garner enough revenue that way from the property taxes. So, and you see, based upon the more districts that have more non-white students, those are the most needy, most funding disparities. And Power, Interfaith, et cetera, has kind of talked about that. And we showed a graph the last time about that. So what is interesting is that, okay, so with the proposal that Governor Wolf has that he put out there, this 1.15 billion in basic education funding is going to be added to the formula. So that's in addition to what is being asked. So this, because the problem is a lot of times the school districts that do have that money, they don't want to lose it. So we're giving additional on top of to try to make people whole. So that 200 million in additional basic education funding will be added to the formula to provide every school district with the increased basic education funding. And this I wanted to kind of share with you was, I told you last time that I was a part of Teach Plus. So there were at least 35 to 40 different meetings with different PA representatives. You can kind of see we had to keep kind of a task list of like who was spoken to, when did it start. So you can see from October of last year all the way up until like meetings were still happening maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago, really trying to apply that pressure on different representatives of the education committee to really like talk about, have a relational piece, start talking about the fair funding, then start talking about something called Level Up, which I talked a little bit about, but I'll talk about more towards the end. But these are the meetings. So they've been going on because these next couple of weeks is the time to apply as much pressure as possible to kind of persuade or have those conversations with them. So that was the basic education funding, and how it's distributed and what they want to do is kind of like what Chloe's going to go into next, because this is the next category.
Yes. Not only is just basic general education, the funding very inequitable, but we see it even more so highlighted in special education. So in the decade between 2008 and 2018, special education cost grew by $2 billion, but the aid only grew by 110 million. So the state was only funding 110 million of the 2 billion need. Can you go to the next slide, Sunada?
Yeah.
Thank you. So this graph here breaks that down. You'll see that the red line, for example, is demonstrating the cost, the expenditures, and you see it start all the way out in the calendar year of 2008, 2009, school year all the way over to 2008, 2019. You see it rise from $3 billion to $5 billion. So the amount of funding that is needed to properly assist students in special education programs is rising dramatically. But then if you look at, or not yet, sorry.
Oh, okay, I didn't know.
Yeah. Then we have at the very bottom here, like that navy blue and then that tan. Those represent how much money the state and the federal government are putting into special education programs. And you'll see all the way like back in 2008, 2009, the state is funding about 1 billion, which is still 2 billion short of what was needed at that time. They're only getting a third of what should be met. And then a decade later, they only bump it up to 1.1 billion, even though the need is steadily increasing. You can see the federal government is contributing even less as well. Now you can go to the next slide, Sunada.
Okay.
And this is showing the same data, but definitely in a different format. So it's placing each year side by side, the disparities, the actual funding, and then the need, the expenditures of what should be getting met. And you'll see that the amount of money the state and the federal government is putting into is like just kind of ebbing and flowing. It's not really increasing much at all. You just see this bottom shorter little graphs, but then the need is steadily progressing and getting higher and higher. So by the time you see the most recent data, the disparity, the difference is just significantly higher. I mean, the state and the is not even covering half of what special education programs need in order to be operating the way they should be.
Yeah, so this complete, like, look at the increased reliance on all these local funds versus kind of what the state, absolutely.
Yeah, and in order to help try and combat this disparity in education, there is this Nellie Bly scholarships. Nellie Bly Scholarship intends to award $199 million in scholarships to full-time students who are enrolled in the Pennsylvania System of Higher Education, or short for PASHE. Those who are economically disadvantaged and need more financial assistance, students can earn up to $5,700 a year. And where they're actually getting this money is from the Racehorse Development Fund. So they're going to be taking it from cash prizes, those in horse races, and funneling and redirecting that to students in need. Sunada will talk a little bit more about that, the Racehorse Development Fund, but I'm going to talk real briefly about Nellie Bly on the next slide. So Nellie Bly, she was born in Pennsylvania in 1864. She attended the Indiana Normal School, which is now Indiana University, but she was unable to complete her education because it was not affordable. She left because the cost was just too high. This didn't hold her back in any way. She still went on to become a pioneering journalist who helped organize reforms in the mental health care system, even went on to complete like this really epic trip around the world in just 72 days. So she was still a very successful woman, but obviously faced a very unfair setback early on in her career, not being able to complete her education because it was just too expensive. So the scholarship honors her by giving financial assistance to students who also want to receive a college education, but are struggling to afford it. So the Nellie Bly Scholarship Program would go to full-time undergraduate students at any of the 14 PASHE universities who have a household income under $104,800. And in exchange, the students agree to stay in Pennsylvania and contribute to the state's development and, just doing great things for the same number of years that they were receiving the scholarship. And how this is going to be funded is from $199 million in slot machine revenue that has been redirected from the Pennsylvania Racehorse Development Trust Fund. And Sunada will now talk a bit about that.
Thank you. Okay, so that's another area that Chloe just talked about as far as where will this funding go that Governor Wolf is kind of advocating for and giving more increased funding to. And we talked about the PASHE system of a network of schools and using kind of that, now as far as like Nellie Bly and how it's connected. The other piece that he wants to do is kind of like also divert or have less money that is subsidized each year to the Horse Development Fund. Now, when I saw the video, when I think it was Susan Spitka was talking about this, she was just saying, gambling, of course, it started like over 60 years ago, but it kind of started with horse racing and it's evolved into kind of what we have now. You can go online, you can go all these different places to do a lot of the gambling. But they want to take 200 million out of the 240 million and divert that towards education. So the money is used for, like they say, cash prizes, it inflates the pensions. It's just using the accountability. The big piece is the accountability or lack of accountability here, or it needs to just be revisited. And that's kind of where this pressure point lies for it. So, when they give examples, they say like $5,700 goes to a PASHE student, $15,000 goes to kind of cultivating this horse. And if you look in the news and you start to kind of Google concerning like horse race development fund, you'll see like a lot of the families are kind of starting to push back because they'll lose their jobs or other things concerning that, because it's kind of all networked in. But one of the questions is, you know, this was subsidized, but the subsidy for this has lasted so long. How are they maintaining or doing this on their own? And a lot of times the horse racers don't even live in Pennsylvania. And this is like a wealthy piece that has kind of continued too. So here are some articles that I'm putting in the chat, so that way you can kind of see it if you want to look at it or take some time on your own. And also the Kids Over Horse Racing information is there. But the big piece here, when you read it or people are talking about it, is how can we have more oversight on this? How can it be, as far as more accountability, letting it be revisited, reallocated? Because here, some of the dates they give it as far as 1967 or longer. So this is just kind of a recap. I'm not going to necessarily read it, but it's millions of dollars in subsidies, and they're really trying to figure out how can we rechannel this and now channel it to educational needs. So when Wolf had his kind of public address and talking about the horse racing industry, this is the reference that he was making as far as kind of using the subsidies per year, not stopping it completely for horse racing, but taking definitely a big chunk from it to kind of fund it towards education now. Okay, this is you, Chloe.
Yep. And some of the charter schools, they're thinking of, Governor Wolf was thinking of implementing some reforms for them as well to combat the disparity in education. So some of the funding reforms they're thinking of doing is having a flat rate of $9,500 per student, properly applying that special education, the funding formula, and therefore saving like millions of dollars. Some other reforms they're thinking of doing is having statewide performance standards for charter schools, something that's already present in public schools. They're just going to put that over. A moratorium on some new cyber charters, so that, the industry isn't just like exploding. Ensuring that charter operators are held to financial and ethical standards so that they are still charging a fair rate. And then just some greater financial oversight as well. Charter schools do have a lot of freedom, and a lot of these reforms are in a way of just making sure that that freedom isn't being abused, and that students are still receiving quality education at charter schools.
Can I add something to this?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like when you think about charter schools, and believe me, like I'm not against charter schools or like pro-choice, but I feel like the oversight that needs to happen or the accountability with charter schools needs to be there. Because remember, as far as like these line items, when students leave public schools, travels with them, but not necessarily like particularly for students that have special education needs, how by law, they're not under the same type of jurisdiction that a public school is. Also, when you have these charter schools that are cyber charter schools, they don't have the overhead that a brick and mortar school has. So all of this money kind of travels as line item travels. If we're taking a child from a brick and mortar, maybe to a cyber charter, and you don't have any of the like overhead issues that you have in a cyber charter, you're online. So some type of an accountability of, okay, if it's switching or moving over, you get half or you get less, or there's maybe a certain amount that kind of goes with them. So that's why that flat rate is like a flat fee, because it can be much more than that. But maybe if there's a flat rate, will that has a little bit more equity, makes it equitable as far as when a student does move to or goes to a charter school. So yeah, I wanted to just add that in.
Mm-hmm. And this is, go ahead, Sunada.
Okay, and this was, and this was just showing how Commonwealth Charter Academy, it was just talking about how, like, once again, this business model versus the focus on the kids. And a lot of time the focus on the students gets missed, but in expanding operations and expanding and becoming larger as a business model, that's kind of where some of these charter schools go towards. So it's just remembering, like, who are we servicing? How are we servicing them well? The students are our clients and the parents are our clients. Okay.
Yeah, can I say some charter schools are for profit?
Absolutely.
So they're
Right.
trying to get your money, honey.
It's a bit like the business. It's a business. So if we're thinking of it as a business, then we're not necessarily thinking about our children that are the most precious piece that we should be focusing on and how to do that well. Yeah, so that's the business side of the charter schools.
That's what Dr. Love emphasizes in her book. One of the things she picks up.
Really? Okay, and that's the book that we received in the chat. We want to do more than just survive.
Yes, because children are just surviving, not thriving.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so I definitely wrote that down. So that'll be on my book reading list too. Thank you, James.
Can I ask a real quick question?
Sure, go ahead.
Super,
Hi, Renee.
quick. Hi. Just so that I'm really clear, all these changes that you've been describing have not happened.
Correct.
But we want them to happen. Okay.
Yes.
These are the proposals. So
Okay.
chopped up in the legislative, in the art, like going back and forth. We will see, but something is going to happen. But these were the first push, like you push and say, you do the big ask, just like when you're trying to buy a house and I want this, this, and this, things get chopped off the list. That's what's going to happen. So we know that's going to happen. It's just how much or what will be taken and used, what will be repurposed. But that was the ask.
Mm-hmm. I mean, like the Nellie Bly scholarship, that already exists, kind of thing. That the horse race thing, that's already set in motion. But all the reforms that we're talking about, and this lawsuit in particular that Sunada is going to talk about, this is still in the works. Something we want to happen. Hasn't happened yet. Right.
So this is coming down the pike, and I spoke a little bit about this last time when we spoke together, but this is huge. Like this is September, October of this year. And since 2014, these 6 school districts, and you'll see it in the next slide, came together, and they are definitely the school district of Lancaster. Lancaster City is suing, and is one of the school districts, and William Penn School District, but they're suing the state of PA because the General Assembly, as you see where it says count 1, shall provide for the maintenance and support of a thorough and efficient system of public education to serve the needs of the Commonwealth, PA Commonwealth. And if we have this huge disparity, like in the last time we met, PA is 44, 46 as far as funding, but the disparity is so huge between our low wealth and our high wealth school districts that it doesn't have to be like New Jersey does something different. They have like an adequate gap or line, and whatever the school districts can't make up in local revenue, then they give from their state revenue. But wealthier districts that can do that, they don't give as much. So why can't we be practical like that and do something, some hybrid of something to like reduce the disparity? So here are the people, the petitioners. So you can see Panther Valley, Shenandoah, District of Lancaster, Wilkes-Barre, you have the NAACP, and you have like some parents involved too, but it says PA Association of Rural and Small Schools. This is going to be so big because if so, then this forces people to change that funding formula, or it's going to force the hand of like, we have to look at this. And it's so big that like a lot of people I've talked to, and I'm going to go to the next slide, like We the People, Power would be involved in it. There are people behind the scenes saying, you know what, let's get the kids together in September to go view the hearing on it. And so people are already moving in circles behind the scenes of getting ready for the September, October piece. What are they asking the court to do? They said, we want them to say that the current funding is unconstitutional, which once again reiterates the need for this fair funding formula or using it with some fidelity properly. Order the legislature to seize and use the inadequate funding scheme because remember, only 11% was going through. And then order the legislature to create and maintain a funding system that'll enable all students to meet these academic needs. So this is absolutely huge. And to me, what's interesting is like, why is this not in the news yet? But it'll be there because funding and fair funding the next couple of months, particularly during, you know, the summer, it'll heat up once we start going back to school. You'll see it. So this.
Okay, so some
sure
action steps, things that you can do: write a letter to the editors, some your local news source in support of Governor Wolf's budget proposal. Sunada is also going to talk about a level up proposal as well. You can also certainly reach out to your school board to pass a resolution in support of the lawsuit. And lastly, you can share some action pages or social media posts calling for charter reform, about the number of reforms I was reading off earlier, and also calling for support of the Nellie Bly Scholarship Fund and the Kids for Racehorses that thing set up as well. Yep.
Okay. So here is the level up. So I'm going to put in, let me just go to the next slide so I can put this in the chat. So nope, I don't want to go there. Let me go back here. Sorry, guys. So the level up is in addition to, so let me go back here. So level up is a proposal in addition to the fair funding. Fair funding formula is in and of itself is just a formula, but this was a proposal that's out there that a lot of people have been speaking about. This came out maybe about 2 to 3 months ago, maybe about February-ish, that it's a bill. It's an actual bill. And what now they're asking, it's House Bill 1167. So, and this is the Republican senator that who introduced it. And April 15th, that's kind of when it came out. So, and what they're asking for. So they're saying, particularly with some of the funding that is being proposed, can we please take 100 million and take the 20, which is 20% out of the 500 school districts that PA has, and give them initially first and try to give help with equity that way and trying to kind of provide that way. So when I put the level up one pager in the chat, it's kind of showing you like what it is, what they want to do, who's kind of affected, but this is also on the books, and people have been talking to legislative representatives about, can we at least do level up? So how this will be chopped up, I have no idea either, but this is out there as well, as far as let's do something about it. So you're strategically dealing with it of, let's get the funding formula right. No, let's get the funding formula and use it with fidelity and have some accountability with it. And then you're saying, let's provide an accelerated pathway for the neediest districts now to get some money, get on that pathway, distribute it to them, and let's help them out that way. So it's like two-pronged. So this is kind of the end of our like little presentation, but what can we do as a church body? It could be emailing our representatives. I shared some information with Josiah last time about that, and I sent like the script that we kind of use with Teach Plus. It could be with a resolution with the school district to support level up, as a church body meeting with people and legislators. And there was a script also that I sent that we can use, social media campaigns, and just kind of continuing to raise awareness and educating others. So I wanted to pause here because we have like one more slide. It's social media, and Chloe's going to talk about that. But I just wanted to now come off of sharing for a second to say, you know, I think that depending upon the work for education funding and equity, that's never really going to change because the governor's race is going to be coming up soon. So I feel like, how do we, as like maybe a church body, when we educate ourselves, how can we form a unit that can kind of maybe address this in an organized way, we're talking with these legislators, because once you kind of have the how we do it, you can take a core of 5 people, continue like make a call, and then maybe get online and as a group talk, discuss, share, and then kind of have a strategic way. Maybe you're focusing on education, the education committee, et cetera. But that's what I meant when I said, as a church, begin to talk to legislators. So there's many ways that might be pretty effective. There's also kind of sharing the social media piece. And Chloe, here it is. Let me just share the screen again. It's your part. Here. Yep.
Yes. So as I believe just I mentioned at the beginning that Sunada and I are part of an organization called Free Together. And we have a Facebook page as well as an Instagram page, and we are partnering with Level Up and sharing informational posts every Tuesday and Thursday. So if you were to like and follow us on our pages, it's just called Free Together 2020. And if you're also interested in Level Up, as Sunada was discussing, they have their own social media campaign as well. We're posting regularly on Tuesdays and Thursdays, just sharing information about inequities in education, and some particular movements like the lawsuit and the campaign to combat those inequities. There are calls to actions at the end of each one too. There are articles that connect you if you want to do further reading, things like that. Is there, I'm wondering if I could.
Can you share the Facebook page?
Yeah, let me pull that up and then I'll put that in the chat. See if you
could pull that up, because also what we put on the Facebook post is a Teach Plus created this link where you can just click on the link and see the amount, depending upon what school district you're in, how underfunded it is, just based upon just data that's already out there. So.
Can I ask you a quick question?
Yeah.
With the Level Up, that was, did I understand correctly that they were saying 100 million to the 100 most?
It's 100 million to, I believe, I don't think it's 100.
Not 100.
It's like I think there's like maybe it's the 20%. So I don't know if it's like 20 or 30 school districts. It's just the most needy school districts that they have. I don't think
okay.
No, it would
they
be
have a
100.
list.
It would be 100 school districts because there are 500 school districts.
True.
So 20% is 100 school districts.
So like $1 million per each. I was wondering how that's being presented. Is it being like how bipartisan is the belief in fair funding? Because is it being presented as an alternative to what Governor Wolf, or is it really just let's get a jump start on this? I don't know. I'm suspicious. So I'm just curious if it's like, look, we just gave 100 million. Why do we need to do all this to change the system? Because it seems like a Band-Aid, obviously. A million, $1 million is not going to go that far.
Yeah. I would have to say from like when I've heard of like when they've spoken with the representatives that what has it been? Sometimes it's kind of convincing that what the issue is. Some of them didn't know how stark it was. And I think from Teach Plus, they came from like a bipartisan perspective in trying to advocate for it.
Yeah.
And they went after some of the Republican senators that were on the education committee, really trying to kind of massage and help them see like what some of the main issues were.
Like I'm not, obviously, just to close my statement, I'm not opposed to giving 100 million to 100 school districts, but it's those systemic issues that are just so huge, you know what I mean? And I just don't want to be distracted from that at all. I don't want anyone to think that they did what they do.
Mhm,
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Anyway.
I
Pat
think
themselves
that
on the back. Yeah.
yeah, I think that the big piece is going to be the fair funding formula and how do they, with fidelity, make sure it's done. Because once, say, yes, we agree to the fair funding formula, then it's going to have to be, who do we have at the school district level that makes sure that the money gets to where it's supposed to go? That's a question to me. And then and then also this lawsuit, I feel, will shake up. So there's going to be a shake up somewhere. But you're right, the problem, the 100 million is just kind of trying to help, but the big piece is like, how are we going to do this fight? The money's there. It's just, why are we not getting what we need?
I want to jump in real quick. I want to go off what Sunada saying, but also explain what I just, the couple of things I just put in the chat. So I started with the link to our Facebook page. And then I also included a link to, how to like find your, they seem to all be blending together. I apologize if it looks that way. Find your school district and actually be able to see the disparities in real time. And then also a link that connects you to your state lawmakers from the Level Up page. And you can use that as a guide to start writing and contacting them. But going off of what Sunada was saying about how like the heart of what we really want to push and what's really going to help is the fair funding formula. And Renee, I don't believe you were here for the last one. And we did talk a lot about it. And what I think is so frustrating about the fair funding formula right now is that only 11% of the money is actually being funneled through it. So we're working off of this policy right now that's like, no, what's the terminology again? It's not like no harm, no.
Hold harmless. It came out
harmless,
1992. Right?
Yeah. So no school is allowed to receive any less money than they have in the past, which means that wealthier school districts that have had disproportionately more are not actually receiving any less, even though they can still do perfectly fine with less. And like, it is kind of hard to convince some families to like sacrifice money for their children to give it to, like there's just that, you have to convince wealthy people to want to like to understand, okay, in order for this to be a just and a fair system, you're just going to have to, your children's school is just going to have less money. And that's something that we're running into a wall against because people aren't getting behind that. But they need to understand that you are actually, the wealthier school districts are in fact being overfunded, and we need to get rid of this hold harmless thing because it's making it so that the fair funding formula isn't being properly distributed. Like unless some of the school districts go down in their funding, the other school districts can't go up.
And two, because of hold harmless, school districts that have more of an influx of students, or if they doesn't account for the moving of students in and out of the school district. So if you've gotten a certain amount and you have less students, you don't need as much. Or if you start at the same and you have this influx of students coming in, you may need more. So that's kind of where the hold harmless is like, is causing harm, or as they say. And I think too, when I was, I just think the pivot, like, the pivot in the resources, particularly because of when we had the pandemic, or still do in some ways, like in March, that pivot because of resources, that you saw that difference. It just exacerbated that because a lot of schools that weren't one-to-one had to order, had to get the money, order, then had to get the technology to students. So you're talking about a 2 or 3 month lag that by the end of May or June, students were getting technology, and the school districts that already had were already one-to-one or could have the money. You didn't lose a beat almost in just trying to make that online transition and going hybrid that way. But that was one of the main issues as far as funding the resources or having that to be able to do that. And then the other issue was like internet. The assumption is that everybody had internet, or that internet was working well. You had kids going offline or not being able to stay on, or kids in like parking lots trying to get Wi-Fi. So no, like when we talk about disparities, you're talking about all of that. And the assumption is kind of like, well, everybody can do it. And no, you have to kind of figure that out. So a part of that group that I was in, you had teachers from Allentown and all of those school districts kind of saying, no, we need to come together because rural students also, as far as access, have it just as bad as, or the need for resources as our urban school districts. They're kind of almost one and the same. We have very similar parallel issues.
Sunada, I know that one of the largest federal influx of money is coming in with the last CARES Act that got passed. How is that money being allocated? Do you guys know? Is it following the Fair Funding Act, or how is that being allocated?
Okay, from what I know and what I've been told with some district people is that it's that ESSER's money is one-time spending. So I think a lot of people in our district, they're going to spend it on infrastructure pieces because you can't use it for teacher salary or anything, but they're going to use it for buildings or trying to catch up on some needs of the buildings as far as repairs, things like that. That's what I know is coming for some pieces that's coming down the pike.
Is that being distributed through the fair funding formula, that money?
No, that's different. I think that's like its separate piece. That was COVID and trying CARES Act money, that's separate.
Do you know how they allocated it to the different schools though? Because
Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say it can be used for teacher salary. Some of it can.
Really?
Yeah, because I went to a CPE on it because I audit school districts, so I need to know how they can spend
Oh,
it.
good. Okay.
But I know some of it can. There's a piece of it's pretty liberal on how it can be used. It's basically can be used similar to Act 1 funding, which is very liberal.
Okay.
But they didn't talk about how it was allocated. And I was just curious if you knew how they decided to allocate it to the schools, because it's a lot of money.
I'm not sure how they're allocating it to the schools.
Okay.
I'd be curious to know how they're doing it for Harrisburg, but I don't know. Well, thank you, everybody. I didn't know. Go ahead.
I had a question on the Bly scholarship stuff. Is that just post-secondary education scholarships? That's for like university?
Higher ed. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
That's
All right. Okay. I was just wondering about that. Does anybody else have any questions?
Do you know when that Nellie Bly scholarship was created? Is that recent or has that been around for a while?
I don't know actually.
I think the Nellie Bly has been around. Let me go back. I thought we put it down there, but I'm not sure. Let me see.
I think it was there.
And the other thing is, if you can pass on those scripts to contact your legislature again, to Josiah, who can send it out to all of us, that would be helpful.
Okay.
You would like me to email him the things that I put in the chat? Is that what you're saying, Donna?
Mhm.
Okay.
Like the scripts and things. 'Cause,
Yeah. So
I'm not opening them up while I'm in the chat, on the Zoom.
Okay.
So there were several things that Sunada had sent me after the last time that I think I've neglected to pass on, and so there are a bunch of different resources that we're hoping to pass on to all of you in the coming week. So some of that had to do with what you're talking about, Donna, as far as the scripts for the legislators and things of that nature. And then, Chloe and Sunada, any of the links that you've put in the chat today, if you could send me a separate email, it just has those links, and then I can kind of make an email to everybody saying, okay, this is a link for this is a link for that, and so on and so forth. And then everybody will have all that information.
Okay.
And can you include like the organizational page from last presentation too, please?
Yeah, Sunada, I don't know if you recall, but during part one, we kind of skipped the last part where you kind of talked. We're going to talk a little bit about Power Interfaith and some of the other organizations doing the work.
Yeah.
And so people were looking for what that last slide would have actually had on
Okay.
it. So
Okay.
if you could even attach that to the email, that slide or the information, either way.
I'll put the info. Yeah.
Yeah. Does anybody else have questions while we have Chloe and Sunada with us?
Not questions, but just thank you for all the prep that it takes in which to do such fine presentations.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I think a lot of, since we've been studying this, you guys, a lot of the thing has been, yeah, we agree, what can we do? And I think you guys have done a really good job of giving us a bunch of things that we can do, both individually and as a church. And I appreciate those recommendations, and just sort of the encouragement to have a more sort of tactical approach as a church. And that's something that at the staff table we'll be talking about in the coming weeks and see what kind of comes from that. So thank you for that encouragement, guys.